and the demographic collapse and membership decline reflects what they've decided to do with.
When you talk about the origin, you're talking of just like the emphasis on revelation and the emphasis on
the content of those revelations. Doctrine and Covenants, section 76. Joseph Smith, up until the imprisonment in Liberty Jail, had, in my view, he had the insecurity of teaching in the absence of a direct revelation. And so what you've got is an extraordinary outpouring of revelations, some of them on relatively trivial matters, like someone coming to him and say, what would God like me to do? And God telling him what he would like to do, which is essentially a string of quotes from the New Testament, telling him what the scriptures say that everyone ought to be doing. But Joseph appeared to be confined. He goes into prison for nearly half a year in Liberty Jail, and while there, it's like a compelled hiatus in which he is required to spend time quietly reflecting instead of that whirlwind that had existed from the 1829 through the 1838 time period. And, he had then been tempered by the rejection, essentially the wholesale rejection. The presidency in Missouri, in Zion, had all abandoned Joseph. There had been apostles who had turned on him. I mean, Orson Pratt had signed an affidavit. Samson of Ard, who was hard to control and had been demoted from his position.
That's the Danites guy, right?
Samson of Ard continued to cause violence in Missouri. But then when Joseph is in prison and they can't get enough proof to continue to hold him, Samson of Ard steps forward and he essentially testifies to all of the deprivations that he had been responsible for, but said he was doing it at the direction and the behest of Joseph Smith, which allowed him to continue to be confined in prison. But what happens after he gets out of the prison and you get into the Nauvoo era is that Joseph Smith has now become tempered by adversity, informed by quiet reflection, the beneficiary of a hiatus that's let him think back about things. And what you get in the Nauvoo era is a rather different kind of Joseph Smith, whose sermonizing and teaching comprise the primary output of what he would provide. I'm saying that all of the material, not the content of the revelations, the letter, there are actually two letters from Liberty Jail, but they're a single letter in two parts, and the teachings in Nauvoo had a kind of wide open inquisitiveness where all truth, wherever you can find truth, there you have Mormonism, come from whatever source it may. Joseph Smith is less reliant upon saying, "Thus saith the Lord," and forcing people into making a decision of, is this from God, is this not from God? And if from God, then I'm compelled to accept it. He instead assumes a role that's more like a teacher or a counselor who is trying to persuade you, trying to invite you in to a worldview and to considering carefully these thoughts that he has, that he's proposing to explain something about God and about the scriptures, and reasoning from them and extending that reasoning out into profoundly deep things about who we are and where we came from, and the fact that this mortal experience is part of a continuum that began long ago and it will continue long into the future. And he rolls out during the same time period the book of Abraham. And so he's not yet released, although he's worked on the Joseph Smith translation of the Bible. When he published Lectures on Faith, the only scriptures that he used were the Joseph Smith translation of the Bible. And then the Book of Abraham comes out during the Nauvoo time period too. I'm saying that all of that, from June of 1844 back to 1829, when the translation of the Book of Mormon was underway, all of that provided a corpus of religion, viewpoints, teachings, revelations, new scripture, that Mormonism in the form that it manifests in the LDS Church today has not preserved. They've walked away from it. They're now doing something else.
You'd argue partly so that emphasis that you highlighted with Smith of persuasion and reason, where today some, and maybe this isn't your exact argument, but some would accuse, especially with excommunications of you, John Dallin, Rock Waterman, D. Michael Quinn, the other September 6th, that it's a lot more hierarchy focused, and it's like you listen to the people that are on top. We don't need to convince you, you just listen.
Yeah. It's become compulsory. In Joseph Smith's day, it was invitational, although there were things that some people did that couldn't be tolerated, and therefore there were disciplinary proceedings. But the appeal was to invite, inform, to turn the teaching into the kind of thing that is described when Lehi got his family to come and taste that brilliant white fruit from the tree. When they taste, they say, "It is delicious to me." And the beginnings of this, when Joseph Smith was around, really was intended to be absolutely delicious, inviting, compelling, fascinating, engaging, mind expanding. It was intended to be invitational and not compulsory. And in part, my perception is that the men who currently lead the LDS Church haven't studied enough, haven't read enough, and don't understand enough to even confront the issues that Joseph Smith was talking about. And so they have no choice. If what you want to do is to say, we've got the truth, but you don't know what the hell the truth is, then we've got the truth and we have the authority now, which is largely what the Catholics have done, is default back to keys and authority and priesthood rather than teachings. Although when Cardinal Ratzinger was the head of the College of the Doctrine of Faith before he became the Pope, Benedict, Pope Benedict actually had a fairly learned understanding of the faith. But, Catholicism rarely plumbs the depth of what the potential is for Catholic teachings. I mean, their homilies are largely based upon things that were taught or said long ago and far away. Joseph Smith was bringing God right down into the community today and talking about a God who walks alongside us rather like he did on the road to Emmaus after his resurrection with Cleopas and the unnamed disciple, whom I believe to be Luke. Anyway.
Going back to the excommunication factor, John Dallin, he's referred to excommunications as barbaric, where he feels like people are kind of cut off from the community. Do you take a similar viewpoint? Do you want to talk a little bit about your experience with it? I know you had mentioned that Russell M. Nelson personally he had tried to influence like stake leaders to excommunicate you, where maybe there was a former stake president that didn't want to, but then a new one came in. And
it came down strengthening members committee, and ultimately Russell M. Nelson came out and said the committee had decided that I needed to be dealt with.
And he was head of the committee at the time.
Yeah. But he then became president. And I think John Dallin is right, because the purpose behind the excommunication of the September 6th, of John Dallin, of me and others, is to convert someone's status from fellow saint and fellow member and brother to other, outsider, not us, alienate us. Now, see, Dallin Oaks was, I hope he listens to this, by the way. Dallin Oaks was president of BYU at the time I was in law school, but when he walked across the street to the law building, he was Professor Oaks. He taught the trusts class. So his status as president of the university was lost when he entered the law school, and he became a trusts professor and subordinate to the dean of the law school, Dean Lee. Okay. And so I knew him as Professor Oaks. Well,
he was your personal professor when you
he was a professor on the faculty in the law school. Well, I'm a law student there, and we know him and talk to him.
You think he recognized your name? Like, I mean, you were like, your excommunication was in newspapers. I'm sure that church leadership discussed it. Do you think he recognized your name as that was one of my former students?
He and I have exchanged letters since my graduation from law school, while he was a Utah Supreme Court justice, while I was a member of the 12, while he's president of Quorum of the 12. He and I have exchanged letters. Yes, he absolutely knows who I am. And in all of our correspondence over the years, when I wrote to him and he wrote back to me, my address to him was Professor Oaks. I didn't call him elder. I didn't call him justice. I didn't call him president. I didn't call him anything except Professor Oaks, because that is the circumstance in which we became acquainted. Mm-hmm. So he's Professor Oaks. So when I wrote to him and gave him input, and commented after his wife had died on his new marriage, I addressed him as Professor Oaks. When he wrote back to me, it was always Brother Snuffer, Brother Snuffer, Brother Snuffer. I got excommunicated, but I had a daughter who was going to be married in the Salt Lake Temple, and I wrote a letter to him, and I said, Professor Oaks, my daughter's about to get married in the Salt Lake Temple, and I'm wondering if it would be possible to have you perform the ceremony for my daughter. And he wrote back to me. He was not available. He was actually out of the country on the date that they had chosen, so it was impossible for him to do so. But when he wrote back to me, which was the last letter, I haven't written to him since, he addressed me as Mr. Snuffer. So Brother Snuffer, yes.
What year was this? Maybe 2016, 2017?
I don't know. They've been married probably probably in the 16 or 17. I should probably know. Let's see. How old is Harper? She's on 6, so 20. So it's probably, it could have been as late as 18. But it's the date's on the letter.
Sure.
Still got the letter. Yeah, Mr. Snuffer. So at that point I thought, okay, you are so uber orthodox in your viewpoint that I'm clearly on the outside, and I'm not rooting for the LDS Church to fall apart. Utah's benefited by, I can't imagine what Utah is going to look like when the continued outflow of membership and decline results in an overwhelming non-LDS majority and a small LDS minority in Utah, because it's coming based upon the direction that they've chosen to take this thing. And Mormon lives have been benefited by Mormon Orthodox personal discipline, hygiene, um, drinking abstention, smoking abstention. I mean, the health generally of the community is better. We have fewer DUI deaths per capita in Utah because of teetotaling. There's a lot to benefit. I mean, even if you think the church has gone haywire, we're still benefited by that church and its functioning. And if it ceases to function, it's not going to benefit the community.
The nuance here is interesting. I would imagine many believing LDS would probably look at someone like you and say, oh, he just doesn't like the church. He wants them to fail. But here you are saying, well, I have some disagreements with them, but overall, I don't want Utah to go more secular. I think that the church does a lot of good. And so the nuance on that is just interesting to hear from you.
Yeah, I think the LDS Church's survival is a benefit to the larger community, any community in which there's any significant population of believing, practicing Mormons. But the way that the men on top are managing it, that they seem to not even comprehend what the religion that Joseph Smith started contains. And so it's no longer containing that. It is atrophying right before your eyes, and the rate of atrophy seems to be accelerating.
Going back to Utah benefiting with the church, do you have any thoughts on, like, the state legislature, for example, made up of, I'd have to look at the exact number, but around 90% LDS. Some claim that Utah acts as like a theocracy. Do you have strong thoughts on that idea?
Yeah, it really, the church exerts significant political influence on what happens in the Utah legislature, but the Baptists exert an extraordinary amount of influence in the Texas legislature. And there are communities inside of Texas in which the Church of Christ, which was founded by Alexander Campbell, by the way, the Church of Christ exerts extraordinary local political influence. Abilene, Texas, for example. Abilene, Texas has a community that is dry. You cannot purchase alcohol in Abilene, Texas. And that's because of the Baptists and the Church of Christ and the way that they have filled the city council. Inside of the boundaries of Abilene, Texas, it's either 4 square blocks or 6 square blocks. There is a town called Impact. Impact, I think there's 4 or 5 liquor stores in this little few blocks and the line of cars that are driving there. But that symbiotic relationship allows the larger community to say that they are dry, while at the same time you can still locally visit a liquor store. And I mean, this was the condition that existed when I was in the Air Force, had been transferred from New Hampshire to Dyess Air Force Base in Texas, which is still a base there. And the condition that existed then because of the political environment. It may no longer be true about how that operates politically today, but it's just another example of how religion. Utah is unique in that it's the Mormons, but Texas is unique in that it's the Baptists, and Massachusetts is unique in that it is the Irish Catholics. So it's not any different from one state to another about the nature of the political influence that exists. It's just that Utah is uniquely overrepresented by the Mormons. And in Idaho, the Mormons have a significant legislative presence, like they do in Arizona, but it's not overwhelming. But yeah, Utah's politics is affected by, if the church approves some legislative measure, the legislature is going to adopt it. And that's true. It may not be true as the membership declines, but at present it is, and it has been for some time, the case.
Your personal view on this. There's people that look to you as a religious leader, and Joseph Smith was running for president before he was killed. I want to say Hiram was running for state senate. There were different LDS leaders running for political office. Do you personally believe that religious people should try to influence their governments?
Yeah, the relationship was always a one-way street. The state was never supposed to influence religion. Religion was supposed to be free to influence the state, but the state was not supposed to influence how religion gets practiced. When Thomas Jefferson was president, he declined to do anything to support a national day of fasting before the Thanksgiving holiday. But when he became governor, we didn't have the 14th Amendment yet because we hadn't had the Civil War yet. As governor, he felt no hesitation about adopting a quasi-religious day of fasting. So, yeah, religion is supposed to be free to try to influence the values, but the state is not supposed to proscribe or prescribe religion in any form that doesn't violate other provisions of the law. I mean, your religion can't be cannibalism. That would be a step too far.
Trying to apply that to Utah, as the state legislature has made stricter drinking laws than other states.
Yeah.
Right? Is people that might not be religious or that like drinking, they might say, hey, the LDS, they're imposing their values of the word of wisdom of not drinking on the rest of us by giving us the strictest laws in the state. What would you say in that situation? Because they're not necessarily limiting someone's ability to practice religion, but they're limiting someone's ability to live their life the way that they would want to.
Well, Utah has taken the position that the only liquor that you're going to be able to buy will come through a state liquor store, which Utah has the authority to do, or a licensed establishment where they can serve under very strict protocol, alcohol. As long as they have made it possible, and they have loosened up the laws about who can get a liquor license. Right now, the biggest difference is that Utah has a 0.05 alcohol level for being under the influence and subject to a driving under the influence criminal penalty, whereas before it was 0.08, and most states are 0.08. I think there's one that has a 1.2 or 0.12, which might be the highest. 0.05 is kind of ridiculous, but if you look at what the purpose of that is, it's not to prevent you from consuming enough alcohol to actually get inebriated and run your blood alcohol content up to 0.2. It's saying if you're going to drive, keep it under 0.05, because we don't want people getting killed from negligent driving. And so it's kind of an extraordinarily tight confinement of the DUI law, but it doesn't prevent you. Get a designated driver and get an Uber and go get drunk if that's what you want to do. Utah will still not prohibit you from doing that, but the links that they're taking under the guise of public safety, and maybe public safety is benefited by that. I have a friend that got a new Tesla with the full self-driving package, where it'll take him, it'll dodge traffic, it'll weave in and out, and I believe that has influenced the respect that he shows for the 0.05 level because he's got a designated driver in the form of a Tesla. But I won't name names.
That sounds good.
And as his lawyer, I don't advise him to do that.
So with going back to like the books you had written, and like a lot of the people that study your writings and your blog, they like the name that is loosely called like the remnant. What's your maybe hope for some of these people? Some of them, they meet together on Sundays and they might look at scripture together and kind of practice their beliefs together.
I would hope that the original version of Mormonism that began with Joseph Smith could be revived and new life brought into it, and that religion might not perish from the earth, because entrusted into the hands of the LDS Church, the RLDS Church, which is converted into the Community of Christ, the Monongahela branch, which is some form of Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, all of the splinter polygamous cults. Everywhere I look, in every form that these organized factions of Mormonism have assumed, they have let what began to atrophy, and most of them, in clearly following the lead of what the Latter-day Saints have done with their church, most of them have resorted into the authoritarian hierarchical model in which the institutionalization has allowed the religion itself to become confined, controlled, dictated, and then all you need to do is to have anyone who winds up in possession of the authoritative seat to lose focus, lose memory, lose understanding, and now the institution itself has grown progressively more ignorant. And what I would hope is that um, in perpetuating through persuasion alone a attempt to revive and breathe life back into what was once here, that it stands a chance of surviving, even if it only survives in the possession of a small group. As long as it survives, it will ultimately win because the truth is infectious. The truth is compelling. The truth is able, if preached, to work upon the mind, the heart, the spirit of the person hearing the truth to the point where they realize they cannot deny it and they cannot resist it. If as long as it gets perpetuated, it will win because darkness has a force that eventually tires out all of the people who are subjected to that force. Um, the Soviet Union fell apart. The Islamic bloc is no longer a bloc. I mean, you go to Dubai.
You're about like the Ottoman Empire?
Yeah, it's no longer the controlling moral force in the sense that it dominates, controls, dictates. I mean, um, the Shiites have their wet dream about what they're going to manage to pull off, but it's not going to work. And in the dying throes, there was a time, and it was when the West came in contact with the Islamic world during the Crusades, when they had perpetuated, the West no longer had Plato and Aristotle. We no longer had the Greek philosophers. They had only been preserved on the Islamic side. The West didn't have agricultural understanding. We didn't have the water wheel. The West didn't have technology or understanding that came about as a result of encounters with the Islamic world during the Crusades, and it was the Enlightenment brought about by that caused the Renaissance, because the Islamic bloc was far more liberal, far more enlightened, far more scientific, far more open, far more willing to investigate. And now, I mean, here we are, 1,000 years later, and it's flipped. In the Islamic world, if it weren't for oil, they would be living in mud huts and hunting with sharp sticks. The Islamic world is only in the modern phase because of oil, but the technology, the inventions, the creativity, the stuff that is going on through the scientific method is coming out of the West, because that's where freedom and light and inquisitorialness and investigation is permitted. And religion is no different than the larger effect that you have on society when you oppress, control, dictate, or you turn free and you make it enticing, inviting, and open and susceptible of the kind of excitement that ought to come from discovering new truths, whether those truths are scientific or moral or religious or just profound philosophical insight into um, the plight of every man. My wife is a mental health counselor, and as part of what she's been learning, studying, and developing, we're at the very early stages of investigation into the functioning of the brain, how the brain actually operates. But we have methods now in which the reaction of the brain, the synapses, all of what's going on inside the brain can be measured and tested and checked against what's going on outside the person. And what has profoundly affected my wife's viewpoint is that largely there is a physical basis for everything we find in the Sermon on the Mount. Everything that we find in the gospel, in religion, has within it a relationship to the body, the mind, the physical world, and that religion is not meaningless in the sense that you can be happy in life by simply confining yourself to the scientific method. You can be happiest when you accept truth that comes from everywhere. And one of Joseph Smith's statements was that Mormonism is truth. And so if we believe that Mormonism is truth, then if we find a truth, no matter where we find it, it belongs to the religion that Joseph practiced and that I would like to see not perish from the earth ever again. It's made its entry on several occasions, and then it's begun to atrophy. You have restoration and you have apostasy. And apostasy has dominated the history of mankind from the time Adam left the garden. I mean, they were grandparents before they had the first child they thought would be a believer in the form of Cain. And Cain ultimately didn't work out either. But apostasy has dominated. It dominated in the Old Testament. It dominated in New Testament. In the wake of the New Testament canon, it dominated, and it dominates now in the wake of Joseph Smith if we are not willing to engage in restoration. So what I would hope for the people is that we would actively, continually, and purposefully engage in restoration and search deep into the things of God.
Yeah, thanks for that. For what you hope for future of those that are part of the remnant. Something that stood out to me is you were talking about other Mormon groups. You talked about some of the polygamous groups, and I wanted to kind of tying a few ideas in together. Well, first off, did you ever see the Keep Sweet, Pray and Obey documentary that came out about the Warren Jeffs group?
I didn't see that one, but I just saw the one about the false prophet Bateman, Samuel Bateman. I just saw that one. I didn't see the one about Warren Jeffs.
It's pretty wild stuff.
By the way, I went after Warren Jeffs was in jail, and I believe Samuel Bateman had been arrested, but he hadn't been convicted, and he hadn't gone to trial, and they were still in the process of trying to sort through what they were going to do with him. I went down to the Short Creek area and talked to them, and I'm planning to go back down there and talk to them again.
When you say them, like the members of that group, or
whoever will come out of the.
This was the group that Samuel Bateman was leading, or is this?
Well, the Short Creek area is primarily FLDS.
Okay.
And so not all of them got on board with Bateman, and not all of them have stayed on board with Warren Jeffs. There are a few who are independent polygamists, but the invitation when I went down there and talked to them was open to all. I wanted all of them to come and hear what I had to say. And when I go back down there again, I'll welcome any of them that want to come. Um, I mean, I didn't know about the Bateman mess that was underway when I went down there and talked to them last time, but I've now watched that documentary, and I mean, it just it's like my wife said. Largely, the polygamous cults are just engaging in sex trade, just the manipulation and abuse of young women. And by the time a lady gets into her middle ages and has a crop of children, they are literally dependent upon the polygamous environment to survive for them and their children. And so it really is a trap for women, and overall, just a tragedy.
It's like a whole planned infrastructure almost.
Yeah.
But going back to that, and I'd mentioned this in email, so I was able to meet D. Michael Quinn and
Yeah.
sort of became friends. And I remember him mentioning to me, this was probably back in maybe 2017. He had said that he had met you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he said you were a nice guy, and he talked about one of the main things that he disagreed with you on was polygamy, and Joseph's polygamy specifically.
Yeah.
And he's someone that went into a lot of archives, and so you both are pretty strong on your views. You believe that Joseph Smith was not practicing polygamy, was the last that I had